My name is John, and welcome to the Tech Leader Pro podcast. It is week 6 of 2024, Friday the 9th of February. You're very welcome. So this week, guys, I want to talk to you about blame and why blame is a circular game. So let me explain. So firstly, as leaders, if you help to create a blame culture via your own example, do not be surprised when you get blamed. Blame goes full circle when it becomes the cultural norm, and it will return on you once it gathers enough momentum. You could say that blame is a bit of a boomerang effect. It's also an anti-pattern, and obviously not something that's recommended. Sometimes, however, it can become part of the culture, and it becomes quite toxic. And how this happens is very simple. When something goes wrong, do you as a leader, 1, try to fix it, or 2, try to find somebody to blame? Well, obviously if the answer is 2, that's a negative example that you're setting to your team. I once had a manager who used to say to me, I just want one neck that I can strangle. Just give me one person that owns this. And that's obviously a very negative thing to say. Essentially what he's saying is, if this goes wrong, I want one person that I can blame. I don't even want to think about it. I just want to go straight to that person and start blaming them. And it's a terrible precedent to set in your team, because essentially what you're showing to your team is, it's okay to blame people, and it's okay to blame one another. And eventually, they will start to blame you. In a good team, people will know themselves when they messed up. They don't need to be told by you as their leader. They already know. They're professionals. They know when they made a mistake. They know what they need to do to correct it. Adding drama to an already bad situation simply makes it worse. Instead, if you quietly give people the time to fix their own mistakes, they would appreciate that a lot more. It's demonstrating a degree of trust. But if you come in and pile in on the problem, well, that's not helping at all. It's just adding a lot of noise. It's damaging morale, and it's making people think that you don't trust them. You're demonstrating that by your actions. And it might feel good in the moment when the adrenaline is flowing to start to finger point. It starts to feel like you're doing something. It starts to feel like, it's catharsis. You're getting it off your chest. But in reality, what you're doing is you're damaging those relationships of trust. And that's something that's going to come back and bite you later on. And it's a mistake that I see a lot of inexperienced leaders making, is the initial reaction to a bad situation is emotional. It's not to be calm and to think, okay, how do we fix this, guys? How do we figure it out? How do we ensure this issue doesn't happen again? Instead, it's, oh, you guys are to blame for this. Who done this? Who was the last person to touch that system? Who was the last person to check in that code? Who done the last deployment? And it's all about who rather than what. And then it becomes quite personal. And obviously that's toxic. You really should instead focus on the what. What went wrong? How did it happen? How do we put something in place to ensure that it doesn't happen again? And don't even mention names. Don't talk about anybody. Just talk about what went wrong. And it's a very nuanced, small adjustment that you can make to your language. But when you do this, it will be noticed and it will be appreciated. And the thing to remember as well, guys, is that failing is learning. It's only a problem when nothing is learned. But making mistakes is a natural process. If you're building and shipping complicated software, there will be bugs, there will be issues, there will be unforeseen edge cases. This is just part of the process. So things will inevitably fail at some point and things will inevitably go wrong. And it's all about the reaction that you have in that situation as a leader. Do you make it worse or do you make it better? But freaking out and blaming people and finger pointing is obviously not good, and that's going to make it worse. It's going to make it worse in the short term, and it's definitely going to make it worse in the long term. And I've seen this happen in teams before and in organizations where I've worked in the past, where the blame game becomes the norm. It becomes the cultural norm. And that's a circular game. It just goes round and round and round. and eventually some of that blame is going to land on you. So, do you really want to play that game? I personally don't think it's worth it. I think instead, as a leader, when somebody tries to start finger point and blame, you should step in and stop it. You should step in and say, "Hey guys, let's focus on the problem instead. Let's focus on fixing it." And a simple way of delaying some of that temptation to start to blame is to say to people, "Let's just fix it for now. We can do the retrospective later, and then we can figure out what went wrong. But for now, let's just focus in on fixing the issue." If a team is stuck in that circular game of blame for too long, it becomes fatal. It will inevitably break the team apart. Trust will be completely broken down, and people will start to dislike each other on a personal level, and then your team dynamic is broken. So obviously, as a leader, that's a disaster and should be avoided at all cost. So apart from worrying about blame this week, what else did I do? I'm still working on my Alpha Framework 4.0 release. Still encountering CI/CD issues, as I mentioned last week. Unfortunately, that's still unresolved, and frankly speaking, I haven't had a lot of time to focus on that. But I hope I can get it fixed this weekend and finally get that release out. In terms of media that I'm enjoying, I started to read a short book by Philip K. Dick called The Cosmic Puppets. It's been fun so far. It feels like an episode of The Twilight Zone, a kind of a classic mystery. So yeah, that's really cool. And generally speaking, I'm a big fan of PKD, so I definitely recommend that. Okay, I will leave it there, guys. I will talk to you next week. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you then. Take care. Bye.